Good morning. My name is Steve Kessler, and welcome to today's Transportation Industry Best Practices webinar, sponsored by the Infinity Workforce System and Vertical Alliance Group. Today's a really good topic, and we've got a special guest today. Today we're going to talk about the people side of trucking and how we might be able to reduce driver turnover. And our guest is someone that I think a lot of you know, Mr. Dan Baker. But before we get started, I got a few housekeeping items to go over. Everyone that's attending is muted, which means we can't hear you. So if you have a question for Dan, please type your question into the panel on your screen, and we'll try to take those questions at the end of Dan's presentation. Also, after the webinar, you'll be receiving an email that will give you a link to the webinar replay, so you can share today's information with others that couldn't attend today. Now I'd like to introduce you to today's speaker, and I'm sure most of you know Dan. Dan Baker is one of trucking's senior statesmen that's been in this business for over 40 years. He's a nationally known speaker, teacher, consultant, and a consultant to the trucking industry. He travels extensively throughout the U.S. and Canada, working with numerous trucking companies of all sizes and types. He speaks at meetings and gatherings of all kinds, from driver safety meetings to award dinners, state and national conventions, to in-company seminars and symposiums. Essentially, his message is the people side of trucking. His presentations are always fun, funny, full of jokes, stories, and one-liners. But he never departs far from his basic theme that if you're in trucking today, first of all, you're in the people business, and secondly, you're in the trucking business. So without further delay, Dan, the floor is yours, sir.
Steve Kessler, thank you, my friend. Hello again, everybody. Hope you're good and everything's going your way. This is your old friend, Dan Baker. And I do mean old, y'all. I just turned 81. I'm at the age when you bend over to tie your shoes, you look around to see what else you can do while you're down there. At this age, I will go back to my dad and remember him. He drove all those many years ago. And I realized that the driver situation today is vastly different from what it was all those years ago. That was back when people were thankful just to get a job of any kind, to any kind. And if you got a job, you stayed with it. You were thankful for it, and something really traumatic had to happen for you to even consider quitting that job. But today, with all of our new opportunities, our new technologies, our innovative methods, you can whip out your old cell phone and scan the market for the latest information or the best offer in the workplace. It's just so vastly different from what it used to be. So many changes. And honestly, so little long-term commitment. Long-term anything doesn't seem to be in vogue these days. If you just sit down and look around yourself in today's workplace, everything is changing and continuing to change. Constant change is an inherent part of our workplace. But you know, certain things don't change. And I repeat from all my previous webinars, trucking is not so much about the roads and the loads and the routes and the rates and the maps and the phones and the fuel as it is about mamas and daddies and husbands and wives and sons and daughters. Trucking's about people first and trucking second, and it always will be. Ours is an honest profession built by honest people with an honest motive. Speaking of honesty, I heard a cute story about a guy driving down the street, and he looks up at the sign in his front yard, says talking dog for sale. So this guy pulls up, goes up to this house, knocks on the door. Guy answers the door, and the guy says, "You got a talking dog?" And the guy said, "Yeah, I do." And this guy said, "Well, does he really talk?" And the owner said, "Yeah, he really talks. Why don't you go around the back of the house and talk with him?" So this guy goes around the back of the house, and there's the great big German Shepherd. And this guy looks at the dog, and the dog looks at the guy. And this guy says to the dog, he said, "Do you talk?" And the dog said, "Yeah, I talk." And the guy says, well, tell me about yourself. So this dog says, "Well, I worked for the airport security for a year or so. And after a while, I got tired of that. So they took me over to Europe, where I worked with the CIA over there. And I got tired of that. So I quit and came home, got married, had a litter of pups, and here I am." He's blown away. He's thunderstruck. He can't believe it. He goes back to the owner and says, "The dog really can talk." And the owner said, "Well, I told you he could talk." And the guy said, "And you're selling him?" And the owner said, "Yep, I'm selling him." And the guy said, "Well, what are you asking for him?" The owner said, $10. And the guy said, $10? You're selling the talking dog for $10? Why in the world would you sell a talking dog for $10? And the owner said, he's a liar. He didn't do any of that stuff. I love that story. But it leaves us with the question, what's the truth and what makes sense and what doesn't make sense? You know, in trucking, that's a big problem. As I was thinking about how I would approach our webinar today, I read a question, a really good question from one of our participants, and it caused me to think back over our last webinar. This participant sent in a question and said, we have a vast majority of our turnover attributed to drivers saying they found a job making more money. But when I get them to discuss the new position with me, they typically come to the realization that it would be impossible to run that number of miles consistently to earn what the other recruiter promised. So how do we as a company, how do we as a company that consistently runs 2,500 miles per week on every driver compete with the promises of other recruiters to say they run 3,000, 3,500 miles a week? That's a really good question. And my answer to that is very sincere, to that very sincere question, is to say that the idea of the area of driver turnover, money and remuneration is a big issue, will continue to be, but I want to tell you something. Money is not the solution to driver turnover. Yeah, it may have a lot to do with it, but the heart of the issue is essentially a people issue. It's a human issue. Let me go back to one of my old overused statements, all right? People don't remember what you say or what you do nearly as much as they remember how you made them feel. We're not only in the trucking business, as much as we're in the people business, the relationship building business. Get this clear. People stay with a company if there is something to stay for. It's not just the miles. It's not just the money. It's not the equipment. And all those things put together. People mainly stay for bigger reasons. People stay with the company because they love working there, because they love and respect the people who work with them, because they feel secure and included and a part of the family, that their relationship with their peers is more important than almost anything else. And that's something that goes beyond the money. It feels like, home. Surely you know what I mean. The really successful professional drivers don't drive and build impressive tenures because of money. They drive and stay because there's something to stay for that goes beyond the pay factor. Man, I've been working with and around drivers for years and years. The true professionals who live and work in this old business, they do it because it's part of who they are. It's what makes them tick. It's their family. Please allow me to sound corny with you and suggest that you would not have left your home if your mama's cooking didn't suit you, or if your daddy wouldn't let you drive the car. You didn't stay because of what you were going to get. You stayed because it was your home. It was your family. It's where you belonged. Your home was your connection to reality. You were loved and you mattered. You could be yourself. You could be loved and accepted for who you really were. You were a true part of your family life, of your family. Now, am I being too corny? One of our biggest challenges is how we can build a company family that has that same kind of warmth and acceptance and concern and support and friendliness that you find in a family atmosphere. And I'm convinced that a lot of our driver problems come from the fact that our drivers don't feel like they belong. They often feel like your company is they don't feel like your company is their home. Just stop and think about it. Many of them live way out there at the very end of your company process, not out on the road, but just at the end of your company's process, a long way from the ongoing daily processes and activities that you folks are around every day, with very, very few of the company people knowing them, with no sense of belonging or being a family member, nobody taking the time to build a one-on-one human relationship with him or her. They see themselves as a truck driver who drives a truck, not as a living participant in a family circle. And many of them feel like nobody cares about anything they do or who they are. Believe me, a lot of drivers really feel that way. They tell me regularly. Let me go back to the old inside the wall, outside the wall concept. Bear with me. If you look up from your specific job in your company, there are a lot of other job functions around you. You live inside the wall, all the way from advertising to recruiting, to processing, to orientation, to safety, to maintenance, to mentoring, to the driver manager. What departments am I leaving out? I'm sure some. And each one of these company segments is busy all the time trying to keep up with the demands of their own particular workaday world. Hey, I'm not being critical here. I'm asking a plain old common sense question. How often do we look up from all we've got to do and get it done and worry about and think about what it must be like and feel like to be a driver for your company. Many of us seldom look beyond the parameters of our own specific job. I do it, you do it, we all do it. And what's so strange to me is that we think we can keep a driver on board by paying him or her more money. And I wish that were true, but that's not why drivers stay. Driver retention is not just a system problem or a pay problem. Driver retention is a people problem. It's a family problem. Driver retention is a relationship building challenge. Building a fleet of dedicated, hardworking, money-making, mile-running, enthusiastic, committed professional drivers is a human relationship challenge. It's not something you can get somebody else to do for you. It's up to all of us, every one of us who lives and works inside the wall. I say it all the time, so I'll say it again. Trucking is built and maintained on relationships. Relationships exist down under everything else as our basic foundation. Don't ever forget that. That's our essential theme for the day. And so on top of all the other things you have to do as one who lives and works inside the wall in your company, we all need to work on becoming a human relations expert. Now think about that. Are you that? Driver retention is not a pay problem nearly as much as it's a relationship building process. And over and above all the other things you've got to do and get done, creating and sustaining a strong people relationship with your driver is one of the most vital things you can do for your company. And I know you're busy, too much to do, not enough time to do it. Busy, busy, busy. If somebody falls down, we should say, don't just let her do push-ups. It's never over. It never lets up. You have no time. Inside the wall, it's part of the deal. But then outside the wall are your drivers, running down that road with time on their hands, nobody to talk to, thinking about the last thing whoever they were talking to said to them, living on fast food and truck stop gossip, sleeping in a truck, showering in a truck stop, being married long distance, raising kids 500 miles from the house, being homesick, feeling sorry for themselves. And one of those drivers outside the wall have that a whole bunch of you guys and gals inside the wall don't have any of. You know what it is, time. They have time. They have lots of time. Time alone. Time to think, to percolate, to agitate, to complicate, to exacerbate, until all kinds of little things get all kinds of big and ugly. Time alone. A long time alone. And how does that driver use time? As fertilizer. Anything that irks or bothers him or her is going to get fertilized, thought about, figured over, ruminated, cogitated, complicated, exacerbated, and talked about until all of this little stuff gets all kinds of big and ugly. And so we have you good inside the wall folks, and we have our good outside the wall folks. The two worlds don't come together very often. Inside the wall and outside the wall. And how do those two sides connect? Well, we have our connector, the one who brings our two sides together, who sits right there in between inside the wall and outside the wall. This is the person we call our driver manager or our driver dispatcher or any number of other names who have accrued over the years. It's your driver manager or dispatcher or whatever you call it, that person who stands or sits between the inside the wall and the drivers. First, this driver manager or dispatcher is essentially an inside the wall person. He or she is one of y'all. He or she knows most of the office folks and who they are and what they do. It's essentially an inside the wall person, that driver manager. It really helps to make certain that everybody inside the wall knows the driver manager and that that driver manager knows everybody inside the wall. But secondly, the driver manager or dispatcher spends his or her time, energy, and expertise dealing with our drivers who live outside the wall. The driver manager is our relationship builder. And so much of this thing today is going to be talking about that driver manager, the one who bonds the two sides together. He's the connector inside the wall and outside the wall. This is the person that knows that driver personally, assigns him or her their loads, keeps up with that driver, his or her schedule, who's with that driver every day, all the way, come what may, deals with the daily complications, on-the-spot challenges that that driver's putting up and out there on the road. The driver manager or dispatcher is the liaison, the connection, the connector between the inside the wall folks and the folks that live outside the wall. A good dedicated driver manager can literally be the heartbeat of your company as he or she brings our two sides together. Many of y'all know I work with trucking companies all over the U.S. and Canada as a speaker, teacher, consultant. Been doing this, consultant. That's a guy that knows 50 ways to make love and doesn't know any women. But anyway, I've been doing that for over years. I know and have seen a ton of trucking companies of all shapes and all sizes. And I can tell you right now that liaison person, that driver manager, that company connector is one of the most vital factors in your company family. And when I look at a trucking company with its inside the wall folks and its outside the wall folks, I realize that with the help of that driver manager or dispatcher, we are all ultimately not in the trucking business as much as we're squarely in the middle of the relationship building business. I know pay is important, really important, and your driver pay needs to be up to current standards, very important. But I don't want a driver staying with me because of his or her pay. I want that person to stay because he or she feels like they're part of a family, part of what's going on, and part of the company's future. That they're loved and admired and appreciated and looked up to. There's an old saying that goes, the best thing that a daddy can do for his kids is to love their mother. And I would add that the best thing that a trucking company can do for its drivers is to love them and give each one of them the assurance and guarantee that they will be put on an equal footing with every other department in the company. We're all doing different parts of the same thing. We all need to build the kind of company that people want to work for. A cordial, friendly atmosphere where we can all feel like we are part of that company, drivers included. Just be sure that at some level you include your driver in your thinking, your planning, your decision making, your problem solving, your own vision and your own company. Hold your outside the wall drivers on the same status as the rest of you in your as the rest of you in your company. And so that's all I'm going to say about that for now. All right. Let me just go on to my next point. I'm not going to go long today. Our current generations today, we've talked about that in the past, and many of y'all who have not heard me before, I'm always talking about the generational problems we got. Not much on that today, but if you've not heard me before, let me tell you that our wonderful trucking industry is going through a very trying process. It's the process of our beautiful, newer, more educated, younger generations coming on board. They're fabulously equipped to deal with numbers and factors and processes and today's incredible technologies. And they're leading the way in today's innovations and other new methods of communication. But standing behind them, standing behind our new people with years of trucking experience and knowledge are the older generations who are slowly learning to support, admire, and listen to you younger folks, sometimes more slowly than you might wish. But both sets of generations are priceless and indispensable for our current world of trucking. Trucking has room for the older traditions and the newer innovations. And if you lean too far either way, you can get out of balance and tip over pretty quickly. Remember our 5 generational categories we talked about? The old World War II generation, which is slowly fading out of the picture. I'm not going to talk about it much today, but I just want to mention them again. These are the old guys that fought World War II, born before 1947, made out of solid gold. I know a bunch of drivers that are still of that generation, the World War II generation, got 6 million miles, love trucking, can't live without trucking. That's that old work ethic generation. And then their kids were the baby boomers, born between 1947 and 1964. The children of the World War II generation who represent our new foundation generation. We're kind of forgetting the World War II generation. Our new foundation generation is the baby boomers. The baby boomers were raised on big work ethic. Many got a college education, very innovative and successful, very people-oriented, very socially involved. This was the age of the hippies, Woodstock. They got naked, smoked dope, did all kind of crazy things. But it was the age of innovation. We had men on the moon. We had women's lib. We had divorces. Wonderful anchor group for our generational situation. Very trusting. We see them as the new granddaddies now, and they don't think like you think. They think differently than a lot of the younger folks. Old timers cleaning out his garage, and he come across an old refrigerator, been sitting there forever. He said, I've got to get rid of that refrigerator. So he puts it out on the street and puts a sign on and says, free refrigerator. Sits there for 3 weeks. He tells his kid, he said, son, I can't get rid of that refrigerator. Kid said, Daddy, I can fix it. So the son goes out, rips the sign off the refrigerator, puts a new sign on it, refrigerator, $350. Somebody steals it. So he got rid of it. So my point simply being that the old timers, they think differently than the young folks, but they're a great, and there's a lot of them still around in this industry today. And if you've got them in your company, you need to listen to them and honor them and listen to what they've got to say, because they're really, really smart, because they're blown away by you. But you need to listen to them. Then we got the Generation X. They're the children of the boomers. The Generation X group, born between 1964 and 1980. We call them the latchkey generation, because they came home from school and had to let themselves in the house because mama worked, because mom and dad got a divorce. So they're our first high-tech generation. They brought us into the computer age. They're not as outgoing. They're more academic. They really spoil their kids, but they're not as family-oriented. They're more focused on processes and functions. They have really put us into the digital age, the Gen X generation. And then they had kids that showed up, and they were called millennials. Remember that? Born between 1980 and 2000. A generational surprise. We looked and said, where did that come from? No people skills, no common sense. As my daddy used to say, can't pour pee out of a boot with the directions on the hill. At first, we thought the world was coming to an end. Very different from their predecessors. Low on people skills and common sense, very high tech, computer savvy, digitally superb. Many still live with their parents. Many of them do. They're more liberal in all departments. They're the biggest generational changeover we have ever seen. But you know what, y'all? They're slowly taking their place in our industry, and they're very impressive. They're making changes in our industry today. If we'll back off and quit being so, fussing at them, they're doing some fabulous things. And if we would listen to them, we would learn a lot. And then guess what? We've got one more little generation, the Gen Z generation, born between 2000 and now. Much more responsible. That they just came out of the blue. They're much younger, much more responsible and job conscious, more focused on building a successful career, not as focused on getting drunk and going crazy and smoking dope, more eager to jump into the free enterprise system. They're very entrepreneurial. Many of them have already got their own companies. We'll see how they do, but they're really looking good. Extremely smart, highly motivated. They're going to make a big difference. They want to be in business for themselves. So that's our 5 generations. The first one I'm kind of, not talking about much today, the old folks. And I'm throwing these 5 generational descriptions up to you to show you how we're all in a change mode, and as to how we see people, how we see work, how we see priorities. And none of this is good or bad or right or wrong. It's just how the world of work is changing and how we have to be changing to adapt with it. And as we look at these 4 different working generations, our challenge today is to try to bring these 4 generations together into some kind of a workable relationship building mode. Not so that we will be happy and satisfied with our merging generations, but we need to present some kind of a consistent, dependable support mechanism to our drivers. If a driver out there on the road looks at us and sees a bunch of separated job descriptions, focused on each person's priorities, completely hidden behind the wall that separates them from their drivers, the only thing that driver can perceive is a bunch of self-focused people who don't even know or care about who he is and what he or she's doing. We seem to have abandoned our relationship building skills in favor of our new technologies. I want to say that again. It seems that we have abandoned our relationship building skills in favor of our new technologies. Ask yourself what the drivers in your company have to look forward to. It's no wonder that the driver's main focus is going to be on the money that he or she is not making. I want you to feel good and enjoy your work and have a good time doing what you do. But if you leave that driver out of your family circle or out of your perception and your priorities, you will pay a huge price, the price of overlooking why you have a job in the first place. You got to decide whether your company is going to be a trucking company or a trucking company family, a decision that can make you or break you. Think about it, my friends, because your future in this business depends on your capacity to attract and hire and keep good drivers. And money for your job alone will not accomplish that trick. So with that said, Steve, with your permission.
Sure, Dan.
You want to talk about? I'm going to close with one of my old trucker poems. Is that okay?
I think everybody'd love to hear that, Dan.
Don't go to sleep. Okay. We're almost done here. Here we go. It's called When a Trucker Goes to Heaven. Where do all them truckers go that pass the gate and pay their toll? What do you think they're going to find? An interstate road that's paved with gold? A chicken fried steak that ain't got cold? A stomped down hammer where the limit is a state of mind? Hey, trucker man, When they call a roll and you hear your name, and don't go thinking you beat the game. Because the Lord's too smart to let an old trucker man through. You can bet your hand he's got a plan. He's cooked up for a trucker man that his saints and angels ain't tough enough or mean enough to do. You see, every 1,000 years or so, old St. Peter, he cooks up a load of all that junk he makes folks leave at the gate. Like busted dreams and broken hearts and all them plans that fell apart and 1,000,000 pounds of love that turned to hate. And the reason he needs you, trucker man, is because old St. Peter, he just can't stand to see all that hurt and the pain and the sin. He says, I want you to load this well, and you haul every bit of it back to hell, and you tell the devil this junk belongs to him. And you'll know the devil when you see his face. You've seen him before on the interstate. Lots of nights he rode your shotgun seat, staring you down with his cold black eyes, filling that road with 1,000,000 lies, begging your poor, tired brain to go to sleep. You've been through hell in that 18-wheeler. You know the devil's a crooked dealer. You also know what it's like to face the heat. You kept on trucking when the others quit. You got the guts and you got the grit to haul this junk to hell and dump it at the devil's feet. It's a long, hard run to hell and back. When you get there, you just tell old Jack, this is one-time trucker that you ain't got to stay. You want to turn around and run with a backhaul load before you point that diesel up Heaven's Road. Even old St. Peter wants to make this trucking thing pay. And old St. Peter says, now, on your way out of hell, near Endless Road, there's a pile of burned out trucker souls. You load them up, trucker, and you bring them on back to me. And I'll tell you, because you're hauling that load, that's the way I build my roads. I melt them burned out trucker souls down, and I pour the gold out on my streets. All the streets of heaven are paved with the souls of the truckers, y'all. I'm a believer. I hope you are too. Thank you for having me, Steve. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. That's fantastic. That's a beautiful poem. Wow, that was some fantastic information, Dan. There is a question here that somebody has posed to you, if you got a minute.
Yep.
Any thoughts on how to overcome bad comments on social media? You know, people have Facebook and all that stuff. You got any thoughts on how to deal with stuff like that?
I really don't. And, you know, it seems the limits keep expanding. People feel like they can say more and more and more ridiculous things. And, you know, and I just don't laugh at the dirty jokes, you know, don't, you know, encourage it. But I don't think you can stop it. Just kind of ignore it.
Well, yeah, here's what I think. I think you have to obviously be very mindful of what your drivers may be putting out there on social media.
Yeah.
They can create some serious problems by what's out there, especially if something bad happened and you ended up in a court case for something. They're going to discover that stuff. So in my opinion, I would be very strong about telling new drivers that come to my company, they need to be very careful with the kind of things that they put out there, because in the end, it could really be a problem for them also.
It's a family affair too, you know.
Right.
You're hurting the family.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, another question here, Dan. How do you get drivers to bring these percolating issues to light? I find most keep it bottled up until the problems are unsolvable, even when I'm soliciting them for info on the issues that might be bothering them. How do you get the drivers to not percolate about it and instead talk to you about it?
Exactly. That's a huge problem, because they do keep it bottled up, and they don't perceive us open enough to talk to them.
Okay.
They don't feel like they can come in and just lay it on the table. And to all my driver managers and dispatchers out there, I love you guys and gals. You do a fabulous job. You're the heartbeat of the trucking industry today. But you got to get those drivers talking to you. Listen to them. Visit with them a little bit. I know you're busy and got too much to do. And I know we put too many drivers on the driver manager. We do it all the time. But driver managers, when you can do it, take a little extra time with that driver and talk about those things that really do matter. That's a great question.
Yeah. Another question here from Todd. He says almost half of our turnover in our over-the-road fleet comes within the first 90 days of employment. Do you have any advice or thoughts on how we can correct this problem?
When a new driver comes into your company, you make a big deal out of it. He needs to be welcomed in by everybody in the company in one way or another. That's asking companies to create a whole new entry level interest in our new people, whether they're drivers or inside the wall people. We need to become friendly and outgoing and produce a good first impression. It's huge.
I agree totally with that. I mean, and
come on board. There's your truck out there, you know, that's it.
What's kind of what we've been talking about this morning, Dan. You have to have the culture in place where they feel welcomed and they feel they're important and they feel like they're part of the business. Another comment here from Rex. Step we have taken, and we formed a driver council that has quarterly meetings with administration and we put their input into play. They are key to move information around and serve as a sounding board for other drivers. We also have a former driver that serves as a driver liaison who helps directly with each driver to solve issues.
Great.
That's
well, whatever you can do to have little meetings with drivers,
right.
To get them in around through driver manager, whatever, and just shoot the bull a little while. Just chat, make them feel like you want to hear what they've got to say. You bet.
And I think that's to have a driver mentor or something like that, especially early on with a new young driver or a new driver, that can go so far to make sure they get comfortable and assimilate into the job much quicker.
Yeah, we did. It's a big program in that field.
Yes,
making
exactly.
the driver feel welcome. Go ahead.
No, that's fantastic. That's those are great questions. If you got any other questions, feel free to type them in. But I do want to say a few things myself as to wrap up here today. Folks, in today's market conditions, as Dan said, the best way to fight the shortage of drivers is to keep the drivers you already have by creating a company culture that the drivers want to work for. And what we're talking about today is Dan has what we call his cultural relationship training program. And this is about how to build company-wide relationships that reduce driver turnover. And that's done by focusing on improving the relationships that impact the driver and how to help all employees in the company understand their role in being part of a positive culture. It's very important that this is focused on dispatchers and driver managers, but your drivers talk to a lot of other people inside your company. And everybody needs to be a part of this culture. So Dan's got a program that we'll certainly get some information to you about, but the program is really designed to teach you how to communicate more effectively with your fellow employees, how to foster and maintain a corporate culture that makes your company a place where people want to work. It will help you to learn how to behave professionally and how to positively impact and direct your attitude. This is a program that's available to any of you that have interest. So if you would like more information about Dan's program, and also we'll get you a copy of his catalog of content, you can reach me at at my email address, which you should have up on the screen here now if I can get it to switch. And I don't know why it's not working. Let me try this. Now let me get it up. There we go. So you can send me any, if you want some more information, send it to me at that email address, or feel free to pick up the phone and give me a call. Certainly, we're going to follow up with you in the email and provide you with some more information about this program. But ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being on the program. But I can't think of anything really more important in today's environment in trucking is we have to be mindful of the kind of culture we have in our company. And that is also true for safety culture. That's what they're looking at these days. Do you have a culture in your company that lends itself to good quality drivers that are safe? Think about this again too, folks. If you have a lot of driver turnover, you're generally a less safe company than somebody that's got good, stable, long-term, friendly, happy drivers. If there are any other questions, feel free to send me an email or give me a call. But having said that, Dan, once again, thank you very much, sir, for being here.
Thank y'all for listening today.
And any questions that you have, if I don't know them, I know the person to send them to. So I talk to Dan all the time. So thank you all for being on the program today, and we hope you join us for our next webinar. Thank you all very much.
Bye-bye.